Okay, I should have done that at the beginning. Sorry, guys. All right, so I'm going to now share the poll, and everyone will need to navigate to a different window, or you could use your smartphone for this. And there should be, well, I'm not seeing the login for it. I'm gonna restart it. Oh, it was just covered up, I'm sorry. So I'll share it again. All right, so you're gonna need to go to pollev.com/Dave338. I've got the Zoom navigation bar on top of mine, Abe. Are you able to see that? Is that displaying correctly? It's covered up for me.
Hey, Cortland, could you or Abe just copy that and drop that in the chat so we could copy it out of there?
Yeah, Abe, if I could ask you to do that. I've got all the screens up, so don't have, it's not as easy for me. I can't actually even see what the address is.
Thank you.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we'll give everybody a second to navigate there. And speak up if you're having any issues. Okay, we have some results coming in already. All right, is anybody having trouble joining? Has everybody been able to do that? It's okay to unmute. We can have a conversation now.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm on a MacBook and I'm not sure how to get there. How to get another screen of it available.
Yeah, so in your, do you have a web browser open? Like Safari or something like that?
I have, I'm on Zoom, so I must be on, I just clicked on your link. So I must be on either Chrome or Safari.
Yeah, either one of those should be fine. So if you go to pollev.com/Dave338,
but I can't find another window. I don't even know how to get another window. Sorry, I'm not very tech savvy here.
Oh, there should be like a little plus sign in the tab to add another window. You don't do it in Zoom, do it in, you know, Safari or Chrome or whatever you use.
Okay.
Okay, is it working for you now?
Well, hold on. It's not even gonna let me copy. Sorry.
Okay, well, while you work on that, I could give a little background on this. Folks are already chiming in with responses.
Sure, go ahead. That's fine.
Okay.
I'll play and see what I can do here. Is
Okay.
that POLLEV? I'm
Yeah.
just gonna type it in.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, so this question lays out some, 5 sort of options about different ways that the area could grow in the future. This is sort of an overall question of what makes the most sense to you. And we're asking you to rank the options from most desirable to least. So with the folks who've responded so far, currently in first place is the idea of concentrating most of the growth at major centers like at Colorado Station. Second place, focus on, oh, it's changing now as others weigh in. So currently in second, distributed evenly along corridors and centers is in second place. In third place, focused at centers around a few intersections, so less widespread than the answer that's in second place right now. Fourth is spread among large centers and local centers like Florida, Holly, and intersections along the corridor. And then in last place currently is less growth in centers and corridors and more within the neighborhoods themselves. So I'll just ask, has everybody had a chance to weigh in? Is there anyone who still needs to enter their responses?
Yes, we did.
All right, so let's have a conversation. So in first place right now, with the most people liking this option, is you concentrate the growth at major centers like at Colorado Station. And then in last place is distributing it throughout the neighborhoods. Does anybody have any thoughts on why you voted for either the one that you like the best or the one that you put last? What was your thinking? Anyone can jump in.
I'm Sergio Pessoa and Sarah Pessoa. And we choose concentrate a major center like Colorado Union Station. I think I'm not sure how feasible or easier is to develop housing along corridors that they already have housing, which means that it will be easier for the people who is going to live in this housing. Obviously, it could be apartments. They will be able to have access to the businesses. There are some of them that are already established in these areas. If we choose something else, or we approach the issue to solve the issue in a different way, we can run into neighborhoods where there are no businesses and people will have a hard time to get to easy access to their needs. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Other thoughts? I see Jared, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in. First of all, I'm on the planning committee, so therefore we'll try to just listen much more than talk. But in our conversation around this, places like the Colorado Center are going to be beneficial, but they're also not going to at all create the amount of housing that we need in this neighborhood. And so we're going to have to distribute it. And it seems to be that the intersections that can handle that kind of growth are some of the more major intersections. This gets to a mobility question as well. But currently Colorado Center is not the most ideal for pushing everybody into one place and thinking that you're going to get all of the neighborhood growth collected and dense in one part. So.
Yeah, that's the one example that's given in the way that the question is written as Colorado Station area. But what would the other areas be, right? Because you probably need more than one, like you said, to take all the growth.
Yeah, so the major centers would actually be the intersections.
I'd like to jump in. I mean, the questions are all, we're ranking questions based on, we want to do this from the plan. There's some of us that are really not maybe on board with the whole plan of the growth and adding all the housing. I mean, this is a stable neighborhood, and we're not looking to necessarily add the extra housing, the middle income housing. Call me unwoke or whatever, but that's my perspective. You're giving us choices for ranking on something we don't want at all. There's nothing for other, like, don't do it.
Yeah, like
then I
in the
want
first
to say
place.
something too. And my feeling is that, first of all, government is supposed to protect people and protect their property. And if you're putting in low income housing, how are you going to protect us? And I'm worried about my grandchildren. I'm worried about our safety. And so I don't like any of this. And I really think this is wrong. So,
Sarah, you have your hand up?
Yes, I guess I would like to say that I do think that we need more housing opportunities. And I think that one of the things is the zoning, and correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't R1 zoning going to prohibit this? And where are we at with the zoning?
Well, there's all kinds of zoning throughout the area. You know, this is a large area, multiple neighborhoods. It's not just zoned one thing, but a lot of it is what we call single unit residential, which, you know, is just like a house on a lot. You know, that's the way much of the area is zoned, and then that makes it hard to, you know, accommodate more growth, right? There's not as much housing units as there is demand for people who, you know, need a place to live.
So what are the options for changing that?
Well, that's what we have here on the screen. So, you know, that's part of the conversation tonight, is knowing that there is a desire for growth. You know, people need a place to live. The question is, how do we accommodate it? And so, you know, the idea is, as you guys have ranked them so far, you know, is putting more density at in an area like around the Colorado light rail station would mean you'd have to put a lot of really dense development there to put, you know, have the number of units that you'd need for the growth that's anticipated. And there, you know, could be changes that would be made to the zoning, you know, as part of a strategy for how the area wants to grow. Your question's really at the heart of kind of what we're talking about, is what would be appropriate.
And I think that because we just came into this tonight, we did not participate in any of the previous things. We didn't hear about it. And when you said, you know, the question about which growth scenario, it didn't really say, you know, housing or businesses, because in the intro, I heard a lot of people saying that they wanted more, you know, walkable businesses with dining and shopping opportunities, and maybe housing. But so growth and the growth scenario, the idea is housing and businesses. Is that correct? Like we're supposed to be talking about both.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
And-
It is both. It is both, like, kind of mixed together. So if you're focusing the development at a major center, like what's currently ranked first, you'd be saying, make that like really dense and have big change in that area, versus the one that's ranked fifth is saying, figure out a way to spread it around throughout the neighborhoods.
See,
you know.
I would, yeah.
Yeah.
And I would tend to think that was a better idea. And
And everyone else too, it's ranked last. Yeah. Okay. So should we move on to, we do have 8 questions to get through. Should we move on to the next one? All these, you know, start to form a picture, I think, you know, as we go through them one by one. Okay, so this next one is the different elements that make a neighborhood a complete place, meaning that it has everything that you need. So which elements of a complete neighborhood should be prioritized in areas that are getting additional growth? So in the corridors and centers, you know, what we were just talking about in the last question, or throughout the neighborhoods themselves, like if an area is growing and changing, what are the top priorities? And you get to pick 3. So I'll give you a minute to let some of the responses roll in.
A question about I don't know what improved design means.
Yeah, that means it's sort of like the architecture and style of the buildings. Good looking buildings.
What does improvement mean? And
Well,
all
it's
the
something,
same or all different, or
well, you know, it's, I guess I don't think there's like necessarily one answer, but something that we hear frequently in the planning department is people are unhappy with new development. They, don't think it looks nice, or, wish that it had stronger elements, to make buildings attractive. So would that be a priority? Weighing it against all these other things that are on the list, is that in your top 3 things that you think need to be addressed as new development comes in? I still see the bars changing. I'm not able to see how many people haven't voted yet. So just sort of give a little bit more time as they're still rolling in.
Yeah, please do. I just want to add that all the questions are very broad, and we also, to the people who is in this meeting, we need to understand, and maybe I'm speaking for you, is that this is a preliminary asset of what is important to all of us. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be written on stone, but the questions are very broad and they're very hard to choose.
And they're that way on purpose because we're still like really early in our process. This is just meeting number 2. And so we will get more specific as we go through it. These plans take a couple of years, and yeah, we'll get there. We're just not there yet. We're still pretty early. Okay, so currently we have community serving businesses and uses is rising to the top as having the most. In second place right now is affordable housing, and then tied for third, housing for certain groups like seniors or family-friendly housing, and improved mobility options. So overall, those are the most popular with the responses so far. Does anybody want to chime in with why you chose what you did?
Can I ask one more clarifying question? The increased setbacks that didn't get any votes, what is that? What does that mean?
Yeah, a setback it's about how the building is placed on a lot, right? And so if you think there should be more space like between the sidewalk and the building, so basically like the front yard, that would be an increased setback. And less space would pull it up closer to the street.
How about side to side? Is it relationship to the street or to your neighbor?
Which one? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I would say both. It was just about whether it's setbacks between you and your neighbor. So if you think buildings should be further apart and further back from the sidewalk, then you could select that D as one of your top options.
I would like to add, I'm not sure if I pick the most likable answers, but I would like to say that I choose community servants, businesses, and use because they should be interrelated with affordable housing and housing for certain groups like seniors or family. So I think all this integration needs to meet all the requirements for neighborhoods to be sustainable by themselves and to serve. So we don't need people who are going to live in this neighborhood and they have to drive 10 miles to get to a businesses. We need somebody that it needs to be close by. So in that way, we're going to help to the people who is in this neighborhood and is going to help to the environment. Let's say we don't have to drive 10 miles to get to a business. So it is very important to integrate all these decisions into something that it will help our kids, which are young adults, that it will be easier for them to go to these movies, go to a grocery store, etc. So that's what I choose.
All right, thank you. Looks like Scott, you have something to say?
Yeah, I guess just to piggyback off of that, I think it's really interesting that the community serving businesses and uses came as the top choice. I mean, I think it makes sense, but looking at the Washington Virginia Vale neighborhood and where we've seen a lot of development occurring, especially at larger scales, I'm thinking specifically along Leedsdale, where we just had a very large lot go up as a single-use residential building, and we've got another one doing the same. It seems like those are kind of missed opportunities where there could be more of a space to bring in some of the mixed-use component to make things more walkable and have a better mix of land use as opposed to these large-scale single-use buildings.
If I may,
Yeah, please.
I can't find the place to raise my hand. And I also have not been able to vote, but I would just like to state that I'm not opposed to any of the suggestions that have been made. My concern, and I think something that needs to be taken into consideration, is the existing single-family residential areas, which there are a lot of homeowners here who have been here for 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And so when you talk about putting affordable housing in these single unit residential neighborhoods, there's a lot of commitment that has been made by families and people who have lived here for 40 years, up to 40 years. Some of these homes were built in 1966, and many of us have been here almost that long, if not that long. And so when you talk about putting affordable housing in terms of a 4 or 6 or 8 story multi-unit apartment complex in the vacant lot behind our house, in the open space behind our residential area, some consideration needs to be directed to those residents who have committed to this area for this extended period of time and want to continue to see, we've raised our families here. We want to continue to see more families here in our residential neighborhoods. How can we make that happen?
I think that's a great question for everyone when talking about housing, is how to find the places where families and all kinds of people can live, you know, in proximity to all these other things that people are talking about, you know, with this community serving businesses being a top choice too, like making it so people could live near those things as well.
I wonder if perhaps in these solid residential areas, I know the zoning, and I don't know a lot about zoning, but if we're zoned single family resident, with some restrictions, let's open it up to a basement apartment. You know, a single family resident can easily have a basement apartment without disturbing the nature of the neighborhood and still provide some more realistic, affordable housing for a young couple or single people who are not able to afford, you know, the existing rents. So maybe it's a zoning issue.
At the end of
It
the day,
eventually will
it
become a zoning
is.
issue.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, with the time's going quickly, I think we should probably move on to the next question. Harvey, did you want to say something before we do that?
I think I'll try. When we talk about affordable housing, and I'm okay with some affordable housing in appropriate locations, but when we're talking about moving it into residential area, the last caller or participant said, I don't want to come into my neighborhood. I don't want to come into my residential neighborhood. And we hear that. I'm on the committee and we hear that a lot. The problem is that that is in direct conflict, her statements that we don't want it, direct conflict with Blueprint Denver, who says that's what we want the city to be. So the city already made this decision, whether it was with or without public input, I'm not sure. So it's hard to fight it within these smaller neighborhoods to say, I don't want this, because this whole plan is being based on Blueprint Denver. So you gotta watch. On a committee, we have to be very, listen to the community, and if they're saying we don't want it, I don't know how to go back and change Blueprint Denver, not necessarily just the zoning, but it's the total concept of Blueprint Denver. The other thing that I would say is that I put down community serving businesses and uses in the neighborhood, public places, gathering places, community gathering places. But if you don't have a mobility system or improved system to get to those places, then no one's going to be able to use it. And then the other one I put up was publicly accessible spaces. I thought that meant parks, and I was just surprised that it didn't get as many hits as a park normally gets. Thanks for letting me talk.
Okay, can I jump in again? I don't know how to raise my hand other than to raise my hand. I guess my problem is I'm not a supporter of Blueprint Denver and Agenda 2030, UN Agenda 2030. I think it's all wrong, and if that's the premise for everything, then the whole plan to me is not something that I would support.
I agree.
All right, I've put the next question up.
I think it's important that Scott, when we get back or when we talk about this, say that specifically, that this has to be based on Blueprint Denver objectives.
Yeah, and just to answer that question, in case people are confused about it, like Blueprint provides the citywide direction. And that includes saying that housing affordability is a priority. And so, we can't use our neighborhood plan to opt out of that and say no affordable housing, because that would be contradicting the citywide policy. But we can talk in detail about how to do it and customize it for certain areas. And that's really the intent behind these questions, is how could we accommodate it? And your point about the basement apartment, what we would call a basement accessory dwelling unit in planner speak, ADU. If that's an appropriate strategy, that's something that the plan can include, saying, hey, that's an appropriate, way to help meet this need for affordable housing in this area. And we can kind of customize it, for what's appropriate for this area, but we can't use it to opt out. Those are sort of the parameters that we're working within.
Okay.
The only way to opt out is elect new people for the administration.
Agreed. Thank you.
Okay, so we do have, they show up really small on my screen. These options here for different types of housing that falls within this missing middle category of between 2 and 20 units. That's what we've identified as being part of the biggest need, in many parts of the city, is that there's a lack of this missing middle housing. And so which ones look appropriate, just based on the images here. The first one that's getting the most votes is sort of like the large house model, where you build something that it looks like a single family home, but it has multiple units inside of it. And so it's actually more like a small apartment building. This one looks like it has, a couple doors in front of it. But it's sort of designed to look more like a house or a duplex, but there's more than just one unit in there.
I wonder whether Anne thinks, for example, that option A kind of goes with her basement apartment idea, or is it beyond that? Like creating
I
a
do
very
think
gentle way for additional people to live in the neighborhood, may be more affordable.
I agree. I think a combination of allowing basement apartments, multiple, with restrictions. You can't have 15 people living in one 2,400 square foot house, but, and then incorporate some of the duplex, even a fourplex can fit nicely, into a residential area.
Harvey, is your hand up from your last comment, or did you have a new one?
Well, what's up from last comment, but it's like to say, our neighborhood in the Washington Vale area, specifically George Washington area, we're primarily ranch homes. So if you put something into the two-story structure, it's not going to fit in. So if you're talking about what fits and what doesn't fit, none of those actually fit within our neighborhood. So the options need to be expanded. There goes my hand. So
Yeah, is it more of a single story is the existing look that you've got going on right now in Washington, Virginia Vale?
that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Looks like the triplex attached, one from B has the second most amount of votes. The row house format in C is the least, and then D is small apartment building. It looks like that one's coming in third, but it's a pretty distant third from both A and B. All right, so that we don't run out of time, I'm gonna move on to the next one. So this question is about location and criteria. So where and under what circumstances should these housing options be permitted? And then we have a lot of choices here. Would it be appropriate to put them on a corner, just on your busier streets, just on the bigger lots, and so on? I'll let you read through. We'll give a minute for the responses to roll in.
Cortland, do you think it's fair to interpret this as take the things that from the photos previously that you thought were relatively more workable for the neighborhood, and then decide where they might be most appropriate?
Yeah, of those missing, exactly, Abe, of those missing middle options that you preferred, where would they go? What would be most appropriate?
I would say you can redesign them in your head too. Like, it's true that in a ranch neighborhood, maybe they need to look a little different, and those tall things with the pitched roofs would just stick out too much. But if you can imagine a version of it that is a little better designed to fit in.
Yeah, and Abe is taking notes. Abe's taking notes on the conversation too. So, the comment about single story being more appropriate than multi-story, that's how that's being captured.
Well, for the record, I think that a multi-use, multi-housing design, I think that's the way we have to go. And I think that just because we're going to allow for housing like this, these different designs we just saw to come into play, doesn't mean that we're going to have to lose the housing that's there. It means that there's an option. And I think that we're growing, and I really think that we need to see different things next to each other. Like, it's okay to have that townhouse, the row, it's okay to have a couple of two-story, or, I don't know. I really think we need a mixture. I think we need to increase the housing, and that's the only way to do it.
A question on the design of these houses. Are you addressing parking situations? Are these multi unit buildings supposed to have their own parking because, Winston Downs, people have driveways, garages. There isn't much street parking. There's some occasional. But if you're putting units like this in, are you now designing something that's going to demand street parking?
Yeah, there's a parking requirement associated with most uses. So that like a minimum amount that's required. Now, there are exceptions to that, like downtown. A lot of the zone districts don't have a parking requirement, but in most of the rest of the city, you're required to provide some parking on site. So not in the street, but on the lot. Okay, let's see. The top responses, looks like number one was around the edges of the neighborhood as a transition to your mixed use areas or your higher intensity areas that are probably on the major corridors that are around the neighborhood on the edges. That got the most. And then tied for second, we've got along larger and collector streets, which is kind of the same idea. And then when the development is compatible with the neighborhood's existing character. So if there's some of that stuff already there, that might be a signal that some more in that location would be appropriate, was how I would paraphrase that one. Any other thoughts or reactions? Every idea here got some support, but those were the top three. And if there aren't more comments, we'll just move on to the next question, because we do have, I think, about 4 more that we need to get through. Okay, and then this one's about trade-offs. So if we're adding missing middle housing options into existing neighborhoods, we have to consider what the trade-offs are. So please tell us which of the following are most important to you. You get to select 3. The one that seems to be running away with it is limiting the apparent size of new housing. The way I would interpret that one is that you'd be concerned about sometimes what's called a McMansion, where someone builds a huge house, like the biggest that they would be allowed to build on a lot, and then it seems to tower over everything else. Is that correct? Is that what those of you who voted for that one, is that what you're thinking of? New development is out of scale with what exists. That's the clear front runner. Second is limiting involuntary displacement, which is what happens when people can't afford to live in the neighborhood anymore because the prices are going up. They have to go somewhere else that's cheaper. And then similar to that, with 14% third place, we have keeping the housing prices lower as being a big priority. Okay. Well, I'll move on to the next question, which changes the theme a little bit. We're switching to talking about affordable housing specifically. So what we've been talking about is the missing middle, right? Your sort of medium density housing options. Now this is talking about affordable housing. And when we say affordable housing, usually there's some sort of mechanism in place that's keeping it affordable. So sometimes it does occur naturally and you just have an area where the housing is a little cheaper, you know, and there aren't any restrictions. That's called naturally occurring. But really, when we talk about affordable housing, we're usually talking about there being some mechanism in place that is helping to keep it affordable for people, and probably a program where you qualify to access the affordable housing. Okay, so what's jumping out ahead so far is for sale units. So the type of affordable housing where someone actually buys the unit as opposed to renting. And then looks like what's coming up in second place is the larger ones, which is more the family friendly, 3+ bedrooms, is usually family supportive housing. And then we have 3 tied for third right now. Still changing. Not the top 2, but sort of at the lower end of the scale are the ones that are shifting. So it looks like this is maybe where it landed, with for sale being the top priority, the larger units with multiple bedrooms coming in second, and then in third, senior housing and permanent supportive housing. The permanent supportive housing is housing plus services for whatever a specific population might need. They might have disabilities, or recovering from addiction, or those types of things.
I have a question to you, and it could be I don't want to be an extended answer. Have you done or look into what other states or cities have done with housing issues? And I could say, for example, San Francisco is a very dense city, and housing is prime, and the value is very high, even though there are multiple housing. And Seattle is another place where housing is very dense. Have you done on a study or have looked into what other state or cities have done?
Yes, and we'll do more of it too. So we're always looking at other cities to see how we can learn from them, or what they're doing well, or how they're succeeding. But not just from tonight, but we'll have a community survey that's very similar to this, that other members of the public will be taking. If we find out that, say, for example, the for sale strategy is like really rising to the top as something that people are interested in, then we can take that to do more detailed research to find out, well, what are cities doing for that strategy in particular, for sale affordable housing. So we'll be doing more, and as we start generating more specific ideas, we'll be pointing to some of those other examples of cities that are being successful with it. All right, so let's move on to the next question. This one's about displacement. What strategies should be prioritized to help prevent involuntary displacement? Select all that apply.
What does preserving unsubsidized affordable housing mean?
Yeah, so the subsidized affordable housing is where somebody's getting money to make up the difference between like what the what it would otherwise cost, right? So that can mean a subsidy to the property owner or to the person who's renting, like a program to put more money in their pocket so that they can have more money to pay for housing in addition to whatever they can afford. So unsubsidized affordable housing is just an affordable housing type that doesn't have a subsidy attached to it.
Basically, that could mean existing small houses or duplexes or whatever that just tend to rent for less or sell for less, but might be in danger of getting replaced with something newer and fancier that was much more expensive.
So Harvey, do you have a comment while the votes are rolling in?
Are you surprised?
No, just go ahead. You can go ahead and jump in.
I put down other. Until you define what's causing the involuntary displacement, how can you come up with a remedy for it? So that was my feeling as we go through this. So I chose other.
And I mean, generally, you're right. I mean, there could be a really specific cause, but in general, the cause is the same, which is that people can't afford, the housing. It costs more than the money that they have.
And
yeah,
and we talked about some of this. And you're right. It's because they can't afford it. But one of the components is taxes. People can't afford the property taxes. So what's a city and state going to do about that? So there's things that can be done before they get moved out and before we have to figure out how to provide affordable housing. So what are the causes and how do you fix it?
I just got the notice that we're going to get returned to the main group in half a minute here. Scott, do you want to close this out?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on what I was thinking when I selected other, which was kind of what Anne was talking about as far as allowing current homeowners to maybe have additional income by renting out a basement or an ADU, just helping people stay in place as their taxes, like property values, rise.
I think everyone should now be back in the meeting. So we'd like each group, if each facilitator can give us sort of the most important thing that your group discussed. We want to keep this quick so folks can get out of here by 7:30. But if we can do that, so let's start with Goldsmith. If the Goldsmith neighborhood would like to share quickly.
Of course. So I think the main theme that really ran throughout our discussions was the need for affordable housing that remains affordable housing. We talked a lot about how housing that may be affordable today, those prices may escalate over time. So ensuring that any housing that's being added is keeping that affordability into the future.
Great, thanks, Aiden. If Indian Creek would like to go.
Yeah, so what we talked about in Indian Creek is there's a lot of Indian Creek that is really built out, and there are only a few key places where we're likely to have development in the future. So there was a lot of conversation about the corridors, some of the challenges that are facing the corridors today in terms of accessibility and mobility, and then looking at opportunities to reposition sites, also to create some affordability, greater diversity in housing types. And there was an openness to greater density transitioning back to existing built neighborhoods.
Thanks, Eric. I just put in the chat the link to the form. You can go put your email in if you want a chance to win a $20 gift card to Target or a local restaurant in near Southeast. We'll do a drawing after the next meeting on the 10th. So you can do that while we finish up the wrap up. University Hills North, if you'd like to share.
Oh, sorry. So we actually combined with Goldsmith because of our numbers.
Okay, great. Thanks, Libby. Virginia Village.
Yeah, Scott, I'll just add a little bit here. We talked a lot about maintaining the neighborhood character and also kind of creating safer environments, specifically along corridors. Evans was mentioned quite a bit. And then also kind of the inclusion of more kind of smaller public open spaces. So maybe more wider landscape and kind of open areas for folks to enjoy.
Thanks, Jason. I just realized I was sharing the wrong screen there. All right, so like I said, go to the link, enter your email for a chance to win. Thank you, Jason. And then I think we had Cortland in Washington, Virginia Vale.
Yeah, so I think a theme of our conversation in Washington, Virginia Vale was similar to what Jason just said. Maintaining the existing character of the neighborhood. And so some ideas that were given by the participants in that group included an interest in basement accessory dwelling units as a way of allowing more residential without changing the look and feel of the neighborhood. Also limiting the size or scale of new development so it fits in better. So an example of that is that there's a lot of areas in the neighborhood that have single story character. So if a new house was built that was multi-story, that would start to impact that. So there's a desire to try to make everything fit in with the neighborhood as it looks today.
Thanks, Cortland. And we just had a couple folks that stayed in the area-wide section, but similar discussion. We had a lot of discussion around the need for more housing, but how to make sure that that fits in with the neighborhood and doesn't negatively impact the folks who already enjoy living in near Southeast. So with that, we will, what is that? Okay, give me just a second on the, anyone can respond. Okay. I think I fixed the form. Try it again. I'll put the link again in the chat. Sorry about that. I forgot to check a box. Okay, thank you everyone for participating tonight. Sounds like we had some really good discussion. Really appreciate your patience earlier in the meeting when we had the trouble with the breakout rooms. We will try to get that fixed. For our next meeting, which as I said is Thursday, March 10th. So encourage you all to join for that again for discussions around mobility and parks and landscaping and sustainability. As I mentioned, the surveys are on the website, denvergov.org/near-southeast plan. If you have questions, there's a question form on there you can submit and we will respond. Lots of opportunities to participate coming up. So we hope you will do that and tell your friends, tell your neighbors to participate as well. With that, I will let everyone go. Just a couple minutes past 7:30. Have a beautiful Tuesday evening, and I hope to see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you all for doing this.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.